When did your something is very wrong here gut instinct turn out to be right? I had creepy feelings about my mom's boss, a psychiatrist. He and his wife were also my parents' friends and they saw each other socially. I was told off for constantly saying how much I disliked him. Something in me just couldn't stop saying it until my mom snapped and told me off quite sternly, telling me I didn't really know him like she did. He was a kind, generous and truly lovely boss and friend and I should stop being so nasty. It was just a gut feeling, and seemingly trivial incidents. For instance, I remember being left alone with him in our lounge room at one social occasion, when everyone else happened to be out the room momentarily attending to food, chatting in another room or whatever. It was like as soon as the adults left the room he could stop acting warm and gregarious and normal. He totally ignored me like I was a piece of the furniture. Most adults in that situation would have made chit-chat with the kid, e.g. so, how's school been then, marmalady? Nope, he just took the moment to drop the act. His face, moments before warm and jovial, was suddenly somehow very dark and ugly. Little did he know that little girl was watching him closely without his mask on and glimpsed something of his true nature. A few years later, rape accusations came out from his former patient's young boys at the time. These he vehemently denied. My mom actually organized a fundraiser of local doctors, to help him with his legal fees and show support. I don't know. Pretty damn weird really, but it shows how fooled she and everyone else in the community were by this wonderful man. But she soon started to feel pretty sick when one of the former patients killed himself when his claims were disputed, and even more former patients emerged out of the woodwork. He was eventually found guilty of multiple counts of indecent assault, can't remember the exact legal term, of many young boys in his so-called care. Total, utter evil psychopath. Trust the gut, it can pick up cues the mind is too slow to fathom. Was it Blink by Malcolm Gladwell that espoused this theory? TLDR, had bad feelings about my mom's boss and friend. He turned out to be a psychopathic pedophile. 1:30 a.m. leaving a club with a well-lit parking lot. We had just bought a bottled water and were walking to the car. We saw a couple, guy holding girl and girl throwing up. Offered the guy to give the girl our water. He took a swig, didn't give her any, and put it back on the car they were between. We were a little taken aback and told him to give her the water. He made a vile, disgusting face as if we were cheering him on. We walked a few feet and knew something was wrong. Had the guys we were with check back and he was pants down while she was unconscious, not puking. He was forcing himself from behind X. From the front, it looked like all clothes were still on. Once discovered, they fell to the floor and she smacked her head on the pavement. My friends beat the shit out of him and we called the police. Tried to comfort the girl although she was very confused and disoriented. For some reason he was insistent on explaining himself and calling to her by a wrong name. Filed a police report, found her dumbfounded friends, answered all of the detectives' questions when they called for a follow-up statement to give to the district attorney. Evil has a feeling. If you see something, say something. Looking dumb or feeling dumb is much less shitty than what could actually be happening. My freshman year, my math class had a substitute teacher who we all agreed was really weird and creepy. He really only talked to the girls and made inappropriate comments. For context, this man was easily in his 60s. Well, when our teacher come back the next week we complained to him about the sub, and talked crap about him, being a creeper. The teacher was very upset. He said, "I will not stand sub being disrespected like this. I have known this man for a decade and he is a kind, good man who would never do anything to a student, or any person." 1 week later sub was caught, in the middle of the night, breaking and entering a college girl's apartment and I believe trying to sexually assault her or doing some other perverse thing. Teacher came in the next day and apologized. Edit, he was only charged with residential burglary, a felony, but it was a woman's home, at night. I love my stepsister to pieces, but she is way too trusting with people she doesn't know well. About 10 years ago she was living with a couple of roommates who became her best friends. She would tell me stories about them, over the phone. We lived in different cities, and I would just think, Jesus Christ, these girls are messes. She could hear the wariness in my voice after telling me stories about their troubled lives and how they're really good people who have just been through a lot. I didn't buy it. I can't think of all the stories because it's been too long, but they were always sketchy as hell. Cut to my stepsister inheriting $20K from a deceased relative. She was young and super excited about it, and I knew she probably didn't keep the new money a secret. About 1 fucking week later, one of her roommates calls her panicking, saying that this guy who she's been talking to online kidnapped her and was holding her for ransom. A $15K ransom. And she called my stepsister for the ransom. Not her parents. Her fucking roommate. She calls me, freaking out because she didn't know what to do. I asked her if she had told her roommate about the money. Of course she did. Move out, sis. GTFO. Those little girls who are really good people but have just been through a lot, yeah, they're liars. She reluctantly followed my advice and thankfully didn't try to make a deal with them. I told her to call the police. If I remember correctly, she didn't. She still worries me sometimes. I was walking home and a woman approached me to ask for directions. I told her how to get where she wanted to go, but she didn't walk that way, but instead walked beside me and kept pace with me. This made me incredibly uncomfortable, so I said have a nice day and doubled my speed, not running, but outpacing her significantly. A moment later, I heard running footsteps. I must have instinctively gripped my purse strap, because I held onto it as she ran by and tried to snatch it. We ended up tussling for a moment. I shouted very loudly, "Help! She's stealing my purse." Neighbors came outside, causing her to walk away. She did not get my purse. I had a bad allergy season which turned into a bad sinus infection which turned into bronchitis. It wasn't getting any better, so I got into a GP. He said it could be bronchitis or something worse, he couldn't call it. As much as I hate hospitals, my gut was screeching at me that something was wrong. Went to ER just in case. I had multiple pulmonary embolisms. 1 in 3 people with one undiagnosed PE don't make it to the ER. The doc said my lungs glowed in the CAT scan. On the upside, I have a strong heart, so I have that going for me. If you think something is wrong, if you have that creeping, crawling sense of doom, panic, unease, and fear that settled on the back of your mind like a large spider, listen to it. My friend asked me if I wanted to go out to the woods with him and explore abandoned places. He even specifically mentioned that he'll bring a firearm to keep us safe. My alarm bells were fucking ringing. I asked him a couple questions, I don't know what, but concluded that it was sketchy as fuck. My gut told me not to go, so I exited from the conversation while he went asking others the same question. Fast forward a couple years, I heard that he was in prison. I was stunned, but remembered the memory when he asked me if I wanted to go into the woods. Turns out he took a freshman, him being senior at that time, and kept his promise of looking for abandoned places. He found a cabin in the woods, brought his friend inside, and as soon as his friend turned his back, bam! Knocked dead. He shot him in the back of the head. I reminisce on this quite often and think, what if I had agreed? Every time I think of this, I'm very grateful I'm alive. I stopped off at a dollar store to get last-minute stuff for my niece's birthday party, foil or napkins or something. I went to the one I had never been to, in a seedy part of town. There weren't many other people there, since it was a Sunday afternoon. A luxury car pulls up and this gorgeous man gets out and starts trying to catch my eye, like he wanted to ask directions. Dream come true, right? Except my gut started screaming run for no reason. I pretended I didn't see him and got in my car and left. The next morning I see on the news that 3 people were murdered in Charleston, They were all connected to one dude. One of their cars was stolen, and the serial killer was on the loose heading west, through my area. Guess who the suspect was? Yep, the dude I'd seen. They arrested him after he'd kidnapped a girl in Augusta the same night I saw him, and she managed to escape. Still gives me goosebumps. What if I'd stopped and talked to him? When I was in middle school, a kid in my class had a dad who was a police officer. He came to our class when we were in 6th grade as a parent job thing. He wore a bulletproof vest, and invited all the kids who wanted to go poke it or whatever. Not too weird, but seemed a little off to me, so I stayed in my seat. 2 years later, by the time we were in 8th grade, he was a resource officer for the local public junior high, a different school than his son and I went to. Well, while his son and I were in 8th grade, friend's cop dad was grooming another 8th grader at his school. By the time cop's son, the girl the cop was grooming, and I were in 10th grade, the cop was caught climbing into the girl's window by her father. Turns out, this cop started grooming this girl when she was in 8th grade and at the school he was resource officer for, and by the time she was in 10th grade, he had been having sex with her. As far as I know, he's still in jail 9 years later. His son later went into the Marines, and seems to have a good life. 12-year-old me had a weird feeling about this cop, even though I went to school with his son and went to church with him, saw him all the time at the junior high, because at the time, my mom worked there and I'd see him when I was at the junior high with my mom. I'd see this guy at least once a week. Gave me the creeps. My parents' cat loves me. Loves to sniff and lick my feet, play with me from his window perch and generally be an adorable goofy little badass. So last week when we all went out to dinner and back to their house for drinks and the cat didn't come out to greet me, it was odd. He was under the bed and refusing to come out, which was unusual, but we had our first thunderstorm of the season and he's only 2, so we chalked it up to being freaked out and left him there. 90 minutes later my this isn't right instinct is ringing like a mental fire alarm, so I went to check on him and he still wouldn't come out or move, and he didn't seem to recognize me. $1,000 in emergency vet bills at 3 a.m. and we find out he had broken his femur very badly, needed another couple thousand worth of surgery and would likely have been in pain for the rest of his life and had bladder complications that would have needed frequent catheterization. We think he must have snagged a nail jumping down from his window perch, which was about 5 feet high and hung there, or landed poorly. I've never seen my stoic 6 feet 4 inches dad cry harder than when they made the decision that it was cruel to keep him alive and that if they loved him they should put him down. Our entire family is heartbroken. I've never regretted being right about anything this much in my entire life. I've always been prone to gut feelings, but my mom's takes the cake. She went to a boarding school and ended up leaving her senior year, but her 2 best friends still went there. They all lived in similar areas for summer and my mom wanted to go back and see everyone towards the end of summer break when she was 17. All 3 girls, including my mom, were going to take a train to a nearby station and meet up there and take a taxi to the school. My mom got to our home train station and got hysterical, which she never does, and told her mom she has a horrible feeling and doesn't want to go. Her mom told her to absolutely not go and they went home. Later on that night, they got a call that the 2 girls who went were in a car accident with a drunk taxi driver on the way to the school. My mom's most best friend in the world was thrown from the car and decapitated. The other girl was so severely injured that she was more or less a vegetable and paralyzed from the neck down. She lived about another decade unable to speak or move and then passed away in a home. My mom has been through the ringer in life, but this has always made her tell me to always follow my gut feeling. She said she never had a gut feeling when she was a teen, and this was the only time she ever did. She was looking forward to this trip for months, but that feeling was enough to make her back out right when she was boarding the train. My mom is so strong and I'm not sure why this happened, but I'm thankful for whatever power allowed my mother to be okay. Not my gut instinct but my friends. When I was 16 I was chilling with my friend, both really small for our age, 157 cm, on a playground beside a road. That road wasn't too busy, but every once in a while a car drives by. My friend and I were just talking about random stuff when we noticed a car driving by. It was an old car and the engine made a quite unique sound and we were laughing about it. A few minutes later that same car drives by again. My friend tells me it's weird and that we should leave. It was already dark at this point. I just told her to stop being paranoid but agreed to turn off my phone so in case he came by again he wouldn't be able to see my phone light up. Sure enough, he drove by again and my friend went on the ground hoping he wouldn't see us. I was getting suspicious at that point and went down with her. We agreed to leave, got up and started walking towards the road to get home as the car pulls up behind us, drives by us and parks right in front of us. We see the door opening and start running. At this point I still thought it was ridiculous to run away. At the end of the road I turn around to look and the guy has now gotten back into his car and is driving in our direction. Lucky us, there was a road that was currently in maintenance and cars couldn't pass through, so I grabbed my friend's hand and rushed through it. The car got slower at the intersection but then drove off. I am really glad my friend was this suspicious because God knows what would have happened to us had we stayed at that playground. I was 19, maybe 20. Went to meet my then BF's friends at their place for video games and drinking. Noticed they were going to the bathroom in shifts, and coming back groggy and silly. I left, because I was sure something was going down and I didn't want to be a part of it. They were all doing heroin in the bathroom. My ex started doing it as well as soon as I left. I'm sure he would have tried to talk me into it. A month later he OD'd. We broke up after he went to rehab, then ran away and ghosted me 3 days into detox, only to call me after he had used again. Fast forward a year later and he was arrested for possession of 3 kilos and went to prison for a long time. Not me but my mom for me. When I was a baby, only a few months old, my mom felt a little lump on the right side near the bottom of my rib cage. She took me to my doctor and asked him to check and he said it was nothing. A few weeks later she still felt it, so she took me to a different doctor and the same thing happened. It wasn't until she took me to a third doctor and demanded tests be done that they found I had a tumor growing. Edit, talked to my mom and asked for more details. Apparently she took me in when I was only 1 month old, saying she felt something about the size of a pea. The doctor said it was nothing and every few weeks she would go back and check. The third doctor only did the x-ray because she kept bugging him. By this time I was already 9 months old and it was almost the size of a walnut before they took it out. This was also in '95. Tons of comments here, so not many will see this, but one day I was finishing up an essay in the library of my college when I saw someone through the slightly open blinds running. She could have been running to get to a class, meet someone, or 1,000 other things. For some reason I stood up. My girlfriend saw me stand up and ran to me immediately and we ran out the emergency exit of the library. We then ran to the opposite end of the college where everyone was acting normal. We climbed down to the river, called my dad to pick us up down the road, and left the campus following the riverbed. Turns out the girl was running because someone was shooting people. The shooter was making his way into the library as we were running out. When we hit the emergency exit, the main doors locked from the outside and he was unable to enter the library, which led to him getting shot and killed by the police. Was walking through my hometown with mother and ex-stepdad. I was roughly 14, I think. Suddenly a man came up to us and greeted us. As soon as he shook my hand I knew something was very wrong. Ex-stepdad knew him, so they engaged in small talk. The whole thing lasted less than a few minutes, but the entire time I felt this very strange and strong uneasiness. I whispered to my mum that the man that came up really feels shifty despite his normal appearance and behavior, and I told her we should leave ASAP. When he left I asked her who that was, and she told me he was an acquaintance from way back and he was also a man with some serious mental issues who was prone to sudden burst of psychosis that would send him into a violent rage. Turns out he ran away from his caretaker that day and was carrying a knife in his pants. He was caught later on during the day and brought back to the local mental facility. Thankfully the knife remained unused. I was in 3rd grade and my little sister in 2nd, and we were walking from the bus stop to our house. I remember the walk wasn't too long, but my dad wasn't there waiting for us, and he usually was, especially because it was raining. So I grab my sister's hand and we start walking in a giant group of kids that starts to dwindle off the further we get into the neighborhood. Well, this car pulls up and this man sticks his head out and says my name and my sister's name. I got really freaked out, and he says my dad told him to get us and take us home cause he was worried about the rain. I instantly get terrified and I get the worst gut feeling ever. 1. Cause my dad would never send someone to get us, and 2. We'd have known beforehand. So I say no, and this man insists on us getting into the car, so I ask him what the password is. My parents always gave us a password to follow if they sent someone or something was supposed to happen. Like if we were answering the door, we'd ask what the password was and they would say blueberry. Well, this man looks at me and laughs, really weirdly, and says our password. Which is fucking weird because it was in Arabic and this man was obviously not Arab in any way, plus he said it so wrong. He starts to try to usher us into the car and tell us how we could get sick from the rain and stuff. I immediately start screaming, and I guess the high school bus has just let out, and this fucking huge teenage just starts screaming at this man, and another teenage is pulling me and my sisters down the street and telling us she'll take us home. At that exact moment my mom is walking down the street with an umbrella and the man is gone. I told my dad about this guy, and I guess the prison my dad worked at, one of the inmates had essentially put a hit out on my dad and they thought to kidnap us. Still no idea how the fuck he knew what the password was. But yeah. Terrifying. I can only imagine what would have happened if we'd just gotten into the car. When I was in college I sold weed/pills/molly, whatever I could get my hands on that would make me money, but nothing too hard, but still enough to get me multiple felonies if I ever got caught. One day while sitting stoned with some friends, I got this weird feeling and just said all this shit has to go. I spent the rest of the day removing all paraphernalia, had 20 plus pieces of glass, posters showing off my favorite hobby on every square inch of the wall, scales, baggies, dope, etc. etc. Cleaned the place top to bottom, even vacuumed the entire apartment with a dustbuster because my roommate broke my vacuum. Less than 48 hours later I'm sitting with one of the same friends and hear a loud, hard, fast knock. My friend jokes, who TF is knocking like the police? The answer, the police. I had 8 officers in my apartment stating that they were doing a wellness check and were demanding entry to our rooms. I was living on campus and the way it worked is cops had access to the living area, but anything beyond the living room, i.e. our personal rooms, bathrooms, required a consent form. I go around to my other roommates and let them know the cops are there. Roommate 1 said no problem and went to the living room. Roommate 2 was with a friend and about to light up a bowl. Roommate 3's door was locked and did not answer. After about 10 minutes of small talking with the police, and low-key freaking out knowing they're there for me, roommate 2 is still not out. Cops asked me to see what they were doing, so I opened the door and my roommate had been smoking the whole time. I yell, "What the fuck are you doing? The cops are here," and slam the door going, "Oh shit, my bad guys," and told the cops they were fucking and needed a minute. Well, roommate 2 comes out with a cloud behind him and they probable cause his ass and are tearing his room apart. Fast forward 2 hours and they have destroyed his room. And all they found was a couple seeds, not enough to test and determine it was cannabis. Funny part is, after this happened, the cops asked me to step outside and told me about the dangers of the company you keep and that I'm liable for anything my roommates are doing and should be careful of their hobbies, because they were there because someone had told them someone was dealing drugs out of the apartment.